Hello everybody, I am Rue, and this is my cozy corner of booktube, Rue with the Books. If you are new here, then welcome. It's always great to see a friendly face on the Rue with the Book space, and if you've been here before, then welcome back. It's always good to see a friendly face. Talking Books is a series in which I talk about the books that I've recently read, what I'm currently reading, as well as what I plan to read in the near future. It's a great way to, first of all, wrap things up, and secondly, to look forward towards the horizon, to start looking at what is coming up and get excited about those books that are on the TBR pile soon coming up. Today's question is, do you read memoirs? If so, what is the best one that you have read? Please press the like button to support my content, and also if you like books, booktube and booktube content, be sure to press the subscribe button as well so you can get weekly uploads from myself. Grab a beverage, get comfy, relax, and let's talk about some books.
What have I read?
The first book I want to talk about is In the Miso Soup by Ryu Murakami. It's a very weird and unsettling horror book about Kenji, a nightlife guide in Japan for foreign tourists. Kenji has worked with many foreigners, taking them to various red light types of places, showing them nightclubs and hostess bars and things like that. He helps navigate customers in a culture that tends to shun and be a little bit unfriendly towards foreigners, and he makes pretty good money while doing so, keeping his customers happy and giving them what they want. It's all a little bit under the books. He doesn't kind of declare the right things in terms of licensing and whatnot for the law. So yeah, but what the law doesn't know can't hurt them. At the start of the book, everything is going pretty well for Kenji until he gets his most recent tourist and client, an American named Frank. Kenji meets Frank around the time that a schoolgirl's corpse is discovered by the police, which immediately sets Kenji on his toes. Kenji notices a lot of very strange and peculiar things about Frank, like how his stories don't necessarily add up, and the fact that on the surface it looks like he lies a lot. And he doesn't understand, or Frank doesn't understand, why certain things that he does are deemed funny. And that's kind of like a weird social thing as well. He has a strange look to him as well, like his skin doesn't necessarily fit his body. He's almost like this kind of monstrous presence in human skin, and he's very, very prone to mood swings that essentially give Kenji goosebumps and really keep him on his toes. The combination of Frank's appearance and his strange personality are a massive source of discomfort, paranoia, and fear in this book. What this book does incredibly well is creating such a suffocating and uncomfortable atmosphere. As soon as Frank enters the scene, it feels like there's just a time bomb ticking and ticking away. But it's just like a minute to midnight for the entirety of the book. This works incredibly well in conjunction with these really heavy psychological elements within the book. It reminds me a little bit of Misery by Stephen King, but it doesn't have that kind of claustrophobic element which is present in that book that I really loved. Frank seemingly knows where Kenji lives, so Kenji cannot just start working with Frank. It's a very common, like, horror trope where you just watch a horror movie and you're basically screaming at the main character or the main character's friends, the lead group of protagonists, to simply just walk away. And in this book, that isn't really an option. So Kenji has to constantly tread this fine line between keeping himself and his girlfriend safe, keeping other people safe, but also taking Frank to the places that he wants to go and being a good nightlife guide. So Kenji has to kind of tread this fine line in conversations between himself and Frank, finding good times to probe into his past, into his character, what his motivations might be, why he's there. Because what Frank has mentioned, that he's on his business trip, it just doesn't really seem to line up very well, and it's quite an unbelievable story. There are some very disturbing scenes in this book, and if you are a fan of horror books and that kind of moment where the switch just clicks and stuff really hits the fan, then you will be in for an absolute treat in this book. It's very messed up and disgusting, but the horror in this book, as I kind of mentioned, there's this suffocating, horrible atmosphere. But there's other things like just general conversations. The psychological elements are quite scary and terrifying. There's very horrible conversations about women and minority groups, and just other various types of uncomfortable scenes. And all of this works together to just make a very horribly unsettling and scary book. I really enjoyed this book. I'm an absolute sucker for psychological horror, and this book just checks all of the boxes for a good psychological horror book. I enjoyed how uncomfortable I was for the entirety of the book, which sounds like an oxymoron, but that's kind of what you want from a horror book. Frank is a brilliant villain, absolutely terrifying, really steals all of the glory and is such a massive presence within this book. You don't know what his limit and capacity are. So you never know when that time bomb is going to explode and what the catastrophic damage will be. I enjoyed how Kenji has to navigate Frank's moods in this book. It's very much at the heart of a psychological horror book. The ending of this book was absolutely brilliant too. It's one of those books where it's kind of impossible to predict where it's going to go towards the end, because there's not like a very set in stone plot. It's kind of like, does the main character survive? What will the villain do? But yes, the way that it wraps up, I think, is really good. It was very disturbing, but also beautiful at the same time, and I wasn't really expecting that touch of subtle beauty towards the end, which really just, I liked it a lot. It was great. This book is quite short and it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's like 200 pages. I read it in about 3 days over maybe 3 sessions. And was at the edge of my seat for the entirety of it from start to finish. This book has 3 chapters, and I really, really loved chapter 1 and chapter 2. Each chapter is essentially a day, but I found that in chapter 3, it really delved into Frank's backstory, and I didn't really quite enjoy it as much as all of the present stuff that is happening in the book. So that just slightly reduced my enjoyment. It wasn't overbearing, it wasn't like a 100-page backstory. It didn't overstay its welcome too long, but it wasn't what I was in the book for. Maybe if it was kind of interspersed throughout the chapter instead of all of it being in one go, it maybe would have been a bit nicer just to go from past to present constantly. That maybe would have made it flow a little bit better. If it was done intelligently. So yeah, those are just my thoughts there. So overall, I rated this book 4 stars out of 5. If chapter 3 was as good as the rest, it could have been a perfect 5 stars from me. The next book I read was The Color Purple by Alice Walker, which is a completely different type of book. I jumped from a psychological horror into a literary fiction. The Color Purple is a pretty sad book, but it also has some incredibly beautiful and touching moments. The Color Purple follows Sally, and it is written as a series of letters to God, which gives the book a almost diary kind of format. Each chapter details a day in Sally's life, and later on in the book, we start getting chapters from Nettie, who is Sally's sister that ran away from home when she was quite young, and despite their tremendous love for one another, they had fallen out of contact none of which is their own fault, for decades of their lives. Sally's chapters are about her life in America, whereas Nettie's chapters detail her efforts as, in working as a missionary for various different villages in Africa. I actually enjoyed the POVs in this book equally. I found that Nettie's chapters, with her aims of transforming lives and being a good person, to be very hopeful and optimistic. We see entirely different cultures with their differing attitudes to women and education, and it tackles other themes such as corruption and greed. The characters in this book live pretty difficult lives. They live in a time where black people do not have equal rights to white people, and Sally, in kind of addition to experiencing this racism and inequality, also suffers from domestic abuse from her husband, who didn't marry her out of love like most people these days do, but just to have somebody to raise his children. And it's a very shocking moment, at least it was for me, when this father figure, this parental role, gives the same advice to his son to essentially beat his wife so that she does what he says, because it's kind of this constant source of arguments between them. And I found that to be really, really shocking and just really heartbreakingly sad. While Sally lives an incredibly difficult life, one of her character's strengths absolutely shines, which is her resilience. Despite everything, she keeps putting one foot in front of the other, and it opens up opportunities for Sally in a situation where she's not that wealthy, she doesn't have lots of people supporting her. So that's one thing. Sally is a character that you just really, really root for. You want her to get out of the situation and make a better life for herself. The side characters in this book are absolutely fantastic, especially Shug, who, despite her brash personality, has a very touching and intimate side to her. Shug acts as a bit of a rock for Sally to hold on to and is there for her during her darkest hours. Shug's character story throughout this book is really good. We see her being very good at her career and the way in which it allows her to eventually support Sally. There's also Sally's son, who ends up, having a wife, and we see his wife also becoming very relevant throughout the story, and her own character arcs of also experiencing racism and being a bit of a delinquent in some regards, but also being someone that really stands up for herself. So we have these really strong characters throughout the book that have such good presence within the story, and it's always such a pleasure to see them on the pages. This book is very powerful. It tackles themes of motherhood, resilience, sexuality, sexual assault, domestic abuse, racism, and religious missions. While this book is absolutely loaded with so many themes, it works on each of them with grace, giving them the time necessary to flesh them out within the characters' stories and sub-stories, and does them all incredible justice. It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle that forms together, and by the end of the book, everything is kind of well fleshed out and works coherently, and it just paints a really, really good picture of what life was like at the time and what these characters had to go through and how maybe they break these stigmas and overcome these hurdles, and it just works so incredibly well. There is one scene towards the end of the book that I found so incredibly beautiful. Two characters that have been at odds with one another throughout the book reconcile and bond over one thing that they both have in common. It was the highlight of this book for me, and it almost moved me to tears. The ending of this book is incredible too. It just gives you absolutely everything that you want at the end on a silver platter. Color Purple is an absolutely phenomenal book. I'm so incredibly glad that I read it, and it's not something that I would usually pick up. Big thank you to my girlfriend for recommending this one to me. If you haven't watched my last video, you can do so. It's essentially a video it's like kind of like a reading log format, where I read 4 different books that my girlfriend recommended to me and see what I think. So In the Miso Soup and The Color Purple were both books recommended to me by her, and the next 2 books that I talk about will also be from that video. But yeah. So overall, I rated it 5 stars out of 5. Amazing book. The next book I read was Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stuart. Shuggie Bain is a book about childhood and alcoholism and being the odd one out. A lot of the dialogue in this book is written with Scottish pronunciation of words, so it's a nice way to learn to understand Scottish English. Despite being called Shuggie Bain, this book puts a lot of emphasis on the life of Shuggie's mother Agnes, who is an alcoholic. There is a good reason for that. This book is quite hard to talk about without spoilers, so I'll do spoilers for the first couple of chapters and then go spoiler free. The book kicks off with a very unsettling account of Shuggie's life in the future before going back to the past from chapter 2 onwards. With the second chapter, we get some very distressing scenes of domestic abuse and sexual assault between Shuggie's mother and father. After this, they end up moving house for a fresh start where Agnes promises to stop drinking, but upon seeing her failure, she basically starts drinking straight away. Shuggie's dad runs off with another woman, leaving Agnes to be a single mother towards Shuggie. Right, so we should be good for spoilers from here on out. The reason that this book focuses so heavily on Agnes is because as she battles with alcoholism, Shuggie and his brother essentially have to keep a strict eye on her to make sure that she doesn't do anything incredibly stupid while she's drunk. It's very, very sad because it feels like a lot of Shuggie's childhood is stolen from him because he's constantly looking after his mother. It doesn't feel like Shuggie minds that much because she is the apple of his eye, but as an outside observer, we can really sympathize with this kind of situation that Shuggie is in. You only get one childhood in life, and his is wasted on looking after his mother. It's further compounded with the fact that where they move house, it's in a very desolate place. It's an old mining town with nothing to do and absolutely no opportunities. Shuggie is bullied by his peers because he has a lot of very feminine traits. The way that he walks, the fact that he also carries around a doll with him when he's young, the fact that he speaks very posh compared to everyone else who is very, very Scottish. This book is great. I've never read a book that handles alcoholism as a theme, but this book does it with such incredible power. It's an unstoppable force. It shows all of the ugly sides of addiction, especially to alcohol, how situations can get utterly out of control. We see the push and pull of trying to get sober, the emotions that are necessary to say that enough is enough, and the way that such an addiction has so much influence over the important people in your life. This book is all characters and absolutely no plot. That may be a massive deterrent for plot-focused readers, but if you are all in for characters, then that's not such a bad thing. This book has a brilliant ending, it's absolutely gorgeous, and it shows all of the kind of character strengths of Shuggie shine. I enjoyed this book a lot. I rated it 4 stars out of 5. I mainly didn't find myself excited to continue reading, but when I picked the book up and I was reading those pages, I actually was having a really good time and enjoying myself, despite this kind of sadness and melancholy nature of the book. So, it's just not something that you really want to pick up and read, at least for me, but when I was doing so, I did enjoy it. I just mainly kind of wish that also there was a bit more emphasis on Shuggie's life and we got to see more of his actual childhood and the way that he is then forced into looking after his mother and that how it's kind of stolen away from him. The next book I read was Chinese Cinderella by Adeline Yunma. This book is a memoir. During Adeline's birth, her mother died during childbirth. This led to Adeline being a bit of a black sheep within her family, being seen as a curse and being largely unwanted. Adeline tries to counteract this stigma by trying to prove herself to her family, being very studious and winning countless school awards by constantly being top of the class and putting all of this effort in and constantly persevering and really just being committed to this grind. Chinese Cinderella is a very sad memoir. It's a book that constantly made me rage with the way that Adeline was treated during her childhood. She's picked on by her siblings with no repercussions because nobody cares. She's thrown to the sidelines and heavily discriminated against by her stepmother. Her siblings constantly get nice dinners, nice toys, nice clothes. But Adeline gets practically nothing, and this kind of unfairness and unjustness, the fact that nobody cares about her apart from a very select people in her family, and then she's almost kind of forced to not be able to spend time with them. So she is actively treated unfairly, and there's conscious decisions made throughout this book to kind of push her to the side and keep her out of the loop about things, which once again, it really did just make me rage. And just as a quick tangent, the fact that it made me rage is not a bad thing. It's not me saying that this book is bad. In fact, it's a very, very good thing, because it means that I was incredibly invested in Adeline's character story throughout this book. This book is very short and a very easy read, but like, it's just so annoying and rage-inducing. One other aspect of this book that I really enjoyed is its glimpses into Chinese culture. I really enjoyed the explanations of the Chinese language, with how words are pictograms and how small changes to letters can completely change the meaning, or how combining two things really changes the meaning of the words. I kind of wish that this book leaned even further into teaching me about Chinese culture. They were really nice segments that took me out of the intense anger and instead filled me with a fascination for a very different type of culture. There are nice historical elements to this book too, about various conflicts, their root causes and the general social reaction to them, how communism rose within China, how Hong Kong and various other places were kind of detached from these different conflicts. It made me very interested in maybe reading some more kind of historical works about this specific time period. I really enjoyed this memoir. It was short and sweet. It really invested me into the character and taught me about Chinese culture and history. I felt quite emotional reading about Adeline throughout this book, as her story essentially filled me with despair. So overall, I rated this book 4 stars out of 5. I actually just would have loved for it to be longer. Final book I finished reading for this video, which I want to talk about, is The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold. I picked up this one as a recommendation from my co-worker. The schoolgirl, Susie Salmon, is murdered in Chapter 1. It's very disturbing, with sexual assault and gruesome violence occurring. Susie then goes to heaven, and she essentially throughout this book gets to watch her family going on about their lives. Susie hates the person that ended her life, and she wants her killer caught. She experiences frustration as the case goes on and clues start drying up and it seems like a dead end is hit. In a way, just as much as her family, Susie wants closure for everything that happens. She wants her killer brought to justice. This book is about how life goes on after death. It's also about obsession. It's about wanting closure. It's about growing up. It's about love. We see characters fall in and out of love and their reaction to all of these different kinds of situations. The characters in this book are pretty well written. They have various kinds of sub-stories. We see them go about their lives. We kind of observe how they deal with grief, how they want to succeed, Susie, try and find the killer and stuff like that. All these different sub-stories I quite enjoyed, and I found myself very interested in these different characters. All of these characters have very different ways in which they deal with grief. Some want to forget about things and move on. Some want to find closure and get justice. Others want to, kind of take on this mantle of Susie, with her sisters and stuff like that. They want to be as good as Susie and succeed her. So all of these very different people have very different reactions and go about their lives in different ways after Susie's death. And Susie gets to watch all of this happen and almost acts like a bit of a guardian angel for her family. She just wants the best for them, in addition to her killer being caught as well, right? I really enjoyed this book. I actually did think that it was going to lean more into the crime aspects based on the summary, but I'm happy that it kind of lent equally into the slice of life elements. Everyone experiences grief differently, and I feel like we got these different facets of grief through different characters. And to be honest, I'm not really the biggest crime reader or crime enjoyer, so I'm actually just very happy that we did get these character stories, instead of just going crime, 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 solve the case, clue, clue, clue. killer is doing something, blah blah blah. Anyway, so yeah, I enjoyed the more character-focused elements within this story rather than just trying to progress plot in some kind of way. There was one scene towards the end of the book that I didn't like. I'm not going to spoil it, and I kind of understand why it happened, but it's not something that I really wanted to read. The magical realism in the scene also felt a little bit out of place based on the rest of the story. Suji never has been shown to have this specific power. It really came out of nowhere. So it just didn't really work for me compared to the rest of the story. So overall, I rated this book 4 stars out of 5.
Currently reading.
I'm currently about 30% of the way into the second Wheel of Time book, and I'm really enjoying what I'm reading so far. I haven't read any fantasy in like a month, so I've just genuinely really craved that sort of story. The Eye of the World, book 1 in Wheel of Time, had kind of a sucky plot. It did a great job of introducing the world and the characters, developing the lore and whatnot, but the whole plot was basically the characters running away from enemies to get to a certain place. The plot in this book seems to be somewhat similar, but I'm enjoying the execution of it a lot more, and there seems to be a lot more purpose to it rather than just escaping danger. There is an ancient relic, the Horn of Valir, and the main characters have got to bring it to a specific location in the world to trigger the Great Hunt and defeat some evil or something. So the characters will still be traversing this incredibly expansive world with all of these different countries and cities and cultures, but there is an actual reason for doing so, and it will progress the greater plot of the series. I'm finding that prospect quite exciting. It's still quite early days in the book, but I have really liked the start of it. We've had some great dialogue between characters, seeing the maneuverings of the Aes Sedai, but also gotten back to our mates, Rand, Matt, Perrin, Egwene, and Nynaeve. These are characters that are going to be absolutely pivotal to how everything turns out in the series. It's been kind of, well, not hinted at, it's been explicitly said that they are Tiveran, which means that they are kind of very intricately linked to the kind of way that this wheel turns and the pattern and everything. And they've got different powers, and I'm very kind of interested to see how their sub-stories are going to play out and how they're going to kind of very much grow into their power. But I'm also just enjoying seeing them back together for a bit. First and foremost, before any prophecies, they were friends, and I like to see these character interactions between them and these character moments before they eventually split off across this wide world and do what they need to do. I'm not that far into it, so I don't have that much to say, but in general, I'm finding that the plot in this book so far is much better. I'd say that I'm enjoying myself a lot more than I did in the first book. Not to say that the first book was bad, I still did enjoy myself overall. But yeah, I've enjoyed seeing these old characters as well as new ones, and I'm still waiting for those character-defining moments for Rand. I want to see him become worthy of this very special and sought-after sword that he's carrying. So I'm very excited to continue this one, and I'm having a lot of fun reading it. I'm feeling very immersed, and for a big fantasy series, as long as Wheel of Time is, 14 books and everything, I think that is the most important thing, to become immersed and enjoy your time in this big world.
You gotta read this, man!
The first book I plan to read after I finish The Great Hunt is Full Moon, which is the second book in the Dresden Files series. I aim to read 3 books in this series this year to get my hands stuck into the series, so I'm excited to pick this one up and continue it. If you don't know what Dresden Files is, it's an urban fantasy series following a wizard for hire called Harry Dresden. He is the only wizard in Chicago, which means his services are particularly useful. He has an ad in the papers that brings people to him to solve various issues and problems, and occasionally he also helps the police. It's a bit of a soft magic system where he can perform spells with his staff, brew potions with various effects, and yeah. Book 1 sees Harry Dresden solve a double homicide, and Book 2 seems to have him once again solve a murder, except this time there are claws and animal marks, and the murder happens during a full moon. The name of the book, Full Moon, is a very tongue-in-cheek choice for this book, and I appreciate the thought that went into it. It has me thinking that there's going to be some rather silly characters, and it's going to have werewolves. What I've really enjoyed in this series so far is the supernatural elements, and based on the name of this book, I'm definitely going to be getting more of those. You know, we've got vampires, we've got werewolves, we've got wizards and witches, we have talking skulls. So I do very much like supernatural stuff, and I'm very much enjoying the inclusion of them in an urban fantasy series. The characters in this book are also very fun to read about. Harry has a little bit of a dark past which comes back to bite him every once in a while, and an arch nemesis from the olden days looking to catch him doing something that he shouldn't, so that he can arrest him and take him to like the wizard tribunal. I hope this character comes back because I very much so do enjoy this rivalry between them, and I'm very much rooting for Harry to constantly get his back on him and just see how this dynamic plays out. This one is supposedly one of the weaker books in the series, so my expectations aren't particularly high, but it's short and it's a hump that I'm willing to get over to progress in the series. If I enjoy one of the weakest books in the series, then that definitely will set a pretty good bar and mean that going forward it should just get better and better and better. And the general consensus is that Dresden Files is peak urban fantasy. So, you know, just like I'm reading Wheel of Time, which is one of the greatest fantasy epics ever written, now I can read one of the best urban fantasy series ever written too, and hopefully enjoy it. Anyway, I'm excited to read this one, and it won't be that long until I get to it. One of my 2026 reading goals is to read some more Stephen King, because I aim to read The Dark Tower at some point. I've done my research as to the books that kind of have tie-ins to The Dark Tower, and Salem's Lot is supposedly a pretty important one. I know that you don't kind of need to read other books to enjoy Dark Tower, but I'm not really the kind of person that tends to do rereads, so I feel like doing all of my background reading first and then jumping into Dark Tower makes the most sense, so that I can enjoy it to its fullest and get all of these different references that are thrown in. Anyway, instead of yapping about Dark Tower, let's get back to Salem's Lot. So Salem's Lot follows several characters. First of all, we have Ben Mears, who comes back to town in order to deal with various issues that have been plaguing him in his new life. Second of all, we have Susan, whose love of Ben couldn't save her. What does that mean? I wonder. Then we have Father Callahan, a bad priest who has lost faith, but he does end up testing his faith one last time. And finally, we have Mark, a young boy whose fantasies have become a reality, and as such, he is one of the best equipped to deal with the situation. The fact that the summary of this book leans into the various characters so much excites me a lot. I think Stephen King is best when it comes to characters, so I am excited to see how these characters come together to deal with this great evil plaguing this town. I also think that Stephen King is great at writing children. I enjoyed reading about Danny Torrance in The Shining, and about Ellie Creed in Pet Sematary, as well as the kids in The Body. I'm very curious as to how Stephen King will handle having a child take on more of a primary role in a more serious and actively horror story. I don't really know that much about this book, apart from that I believe it is about vampires, and I have been kind of burnt by vampires in the past because I read Dracula and absolutely hated it. So I hope that King can prove me wrong and make me enjoy a good vampire story again. Anyway, the summary of this book is very short and doesn't give away much, and as I said, all I know is that about vampires. So I'm very excited to essentially be going in like 95% blind and see what all the hype is about. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have made it this far, I hope you can really sink your fangs into a good book soon. If you haven't done so already, be sure to press the like button and subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you join the Brew with the Books community. If you would like to connect with me outside of YouTube, I have links to my Goodreads, TikTok, Instagram, and Storygram graph in the description below. Anyway, until next time, Brew out.